Okay, we're going to pick up on the chapters that deal with the expansion of the United States and how the war with Mexico in 1848 really shifts the national conversation on so many different things. But the big one will be slavery, and then that is leads to a bunch of other things that lead to the Civil War. Um, so you can look at this map here, and you can see the territory we're dealing um, with how the story is told between the United States and Mexico. This territory to the north here that's under Mexico was Spanish, technically, even though Spain, it wasn't like Spain had, rigorously, um, planted people there. As we're going to see. And then, Mexico had just gained independence as late as, early 1820s. So to call the land Mexico within, a couple of decades, it'll be mostly U.S. territory. So it's kind of, it then becomes up for grabs, but it fits that whole idea of manifest destiny. And manifest destiny, we go back really quick. Um, Manifest Destiny is kind of seen in these art pieces here. You have the whole like go west of the pioneers. And the most famous one is this one here of Manifest Destiny, where you have, again, pioneers going west. You have the Native Americans, the buffalo kind of being run off the page. And you have this, the technology coming, the industry coming with the railroads and the telegraph wires, and literally the spirit of Manifest Destiny is carrying them along. So this is something that'll be born out of the Mexican American War. So, as I was just saying, the Mexican American War is one of those wars that is somewhat forgotten in American history. I think it's really, more or less picked up steam ever since the Chicano movement, maybe here in the Southwest, but at least as a focus. But it's not a very like memorable war in the sense of celebrations and days to remember, stuff like that. Um, to some extent, you have the Southwest being a place of, and this is a quote, of savagery. At least that's the way the Spanish would have put it. Right? There's the Spanish. It took them a while to send missionaries up into the Southwest, and they had a hard time dealing with groups, especially these wars between the Comanche and the Apache, and the Spanish kind of in the middle of that. So it wasn't, like after the Aztec defeat in 14 around early 16th century, where like you started having this kind of assimilation slowly occurring. The Spanish just kind of, decades later commit to start to move north. It doesn't go so well, and then they're dealing with, as they frame it, these tropes about like the incapacity to kind of make at peace this area. So frankly, both the Spanish and then even the Mexican governments will try to make um, alliances with these different Native American groups in the Southwest. So, what we know as the California missions is something of a kind of a late manifestation of Spanish settlement, and even that is scrapped as um, you get to the early 19th century, more or less. Um, Eventually, when Mexico takes over, it's kind of more than happy to make Texas a little bit more open to foreigners coming in to settle. And this is the like the Austin family, which you blink, and within another decade, there's more of these U.S. American settlers in Texas than even Spanish or Mexican occupants. And so War of Independence for Texas happens. Your Santa Anna is unable to win this war, and so Texas becomes independent, and the U.S. wants to bring Texas in. There is basically there is an attack around the questionable territory between Mexico and Texas, and at this time, President James K. Polk will push for a war against Mexico. Now, Polk ran on this policy of making California part of the United States. So by this time, you already have people slowly settling in California and across the Pacific Northwest. But Polk wants to like finish Jefferson's dreams of empire liberty across this territory, and have it settled. I mean, he's trying to buy it from Mexico, but it's just not happening. Anyways, this is a quick war. In fact, unfortunately for Mexico, there's a lot of turnover in the leadership after independence, and not a lot of like strong centralized leadership. So there's points where the Americans, U.S. Americans, will be in Mexico, even go to the, throughout, and they just don't even have anybody to like to come to the terms of surrender with. So, but eventually the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is signed, and the territory that you saw on the map is what is basically settled. And that issue about you kind of see this in note if you ever read Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which you can find online. If you read clause Article 11, you'll see some of the issues about like, well, what do you do with the Mexican citizens in this territory? And also that language of savagery, even in this document, towards Native Americans. So that becomes obviously that's a big problem. Um, a really interesting story, and I put the link up to the Irish folk song, but there is one point in the story where a battalion of Irish, U.S. American soldiers defect to the Mexican side, and there's this folk song that you can listen to kind of learn about what happens here. Okay, and unfortunately, what eventually happens is you again manifest destiny. You have more and more people settling from Europe, and taking this territory that belonged to a lot of these Mexican families. So essentially, after time, the Mexican citizens become second-class citizens of the U.S. So that's an unfortunate thing that happens shortly thereafter. Now, you blink, and by the time you're at the end of the century, this is what the United States looks like. So pretty much as you see it, see the shine sea, this is what the Mexican American War brings. You have this cross here. So finally, with this slide, let's talk about Chinese American history. So gold is discovered in California. They basically shortly after the Treaty of Guadalupe is signed, and this then makes a mad dash for California. Now, because of British policies, European policies in China, this leads to problems with the um, in China, and so it uses some economic problems. Things like the Opium Wars is what we refer to these times as. So what happens is that you start to have mostly Chinese men migrating over to the U.S. and starting to work not just in California as part of this gold fever, but also in building the railroads. They're going to basically cross the East Coast to eventually to the West Coast. So this is the first true Asian migration from into the United States. There was some already in places like Mexico previously. So it's not the first to the Americas, but the first to the United States. Um, and yeah, if you read some of the documents, a lot of it is about trying to strike it rich, and with a lot of it also being the goal to go back to China and be reunited with family. Very little of the first wave are bringing family with them, so it's mostly men. Unfortunately, the a lot of the Chinese men are met with anti-Chinese hysteria. That is only going to get worse. So keep that in mind. And you're reading the Takaki book. Takaki is obviously he's an expert in Asian American literature, and so he's going to be his best actually in this book on Asian American history. And so one of the things that is often missing from history classes is that some of the first real xenophobic laws that are passed are against Asian Americans and Asian American immigration. So that'll be a story that's just slowly developing around the Civil War time period, and it'll continue following the war. And so that kind of brings the end to Manifest Destiny. And again, the idea, as you see here, really is this push to go west. But it's not just an idea, it is a thought, an ideology that says it was predetermined by God. It was the United States' destiny to be from sea to shining sea. So from New York to California, it was written in the stars that this is supposed to happen.